Okay, so this presentation is about the second and third series study group which is forming. And this is an introduction. In a sense, it's an introduction to, let's say, the background of the studying which will be going on in this study group. We'll begin with a quote from Gurdjieff. At one time, art possessed the same purpose that books do in our day, namely to preserve and transmit knowledge. In olden days, people did not write books, they incorporated their knowledge into works of art. Here's the agenda. We're going to discuss the three series and the cardinal problems that each of these series of books seeks to solve. We're going to discover Gurdjieff's style in the tales, and we're going to discuss the literary style in the second and third series, particularly symbols and metaphors and the use of allegory. Fundamental structure of the three series of books begin with the tales. It's very long, 360,000 words, with 13,000 distinct words, so the reader is required to have a very large vocabulary compared to most books. It includes more than 500 neologisms and invented names, which the reader has to struggle with and investigate, in fact. The book is written philologically. That's necessary to investigate the etymology of many words. Find out what the original meaning was, because often it is the original meaning that Gurdjieff's using. Meeting's Remarkable Men is about a third the size of the tales. The required vocabulary is not great, and the book is not declared to be written philologically, although in my view it's necessary to keep an eye on the etymology of the words used. And then we have Life is Real, Only Then When I Am. That book is 50,000 words in length, similar in its lack of complexity to Meetings with Remarkable Men. There is the mystery in the sense that Gurdjieff declares the tales to be 3 books, which it is, that the Meetings Remarkable Men is 3 books, and you can certainly look at it that way, and that Life is Real, Only Then When I Am is 4 books. But it doesn't appear to be, it appears to be just 1 book. So each series of books is distinctly different from the others. They have a common title, of course, and there are some common threads that run through all 3 series of books. As far as we're aware, the first 2 of these series of books are read out to audience, with Gurdjieff observing the reaction and making changes accordingly. But we've not encountered any record of the 3rd series of books being read out to an audience, so we presume it never happened. Gurdjieff, of course, used these books in his teaching, requiring his pupil to read them, particularly the first series. So here are the 3 series: An Objectively Impartial Criticism of the Life of Man, or Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, Meetings Remarkable Men, and Life is Real, Only Then When I Am. And that's under the common title of All and Everything, and we take this to, well, we regard this as having the following meaning. The All refers to the All as the absolute, as a unity, and everything refers to the universe itself in all its multiplicity. We could take everything also to imply the multiplicity of the Holy Firm, which, according to the tales, is present at the centre of every moon, planet or sun. Gurdjieff and Orage chose words precisely, so we need to consult etymology. So just as an illustration, the word series of books, the word series, that is what we would expect, a number of things of one kind arranged in a line or in a row. But the word book, that comes from Proto-Germanic bok, from bokis, meaning beach, because originally the first books from this language root were runes that were originally described on beechwood tablets. So originally this meant any written document. From about 1200, a main subdivision of a larger work. So the word book is being used in precisely that way, as a main subdivision of a larger work. Let's talk about the cardinal problems. The first cardinal problem: to destroy mercilessly without any compromises whatsoever in the mentation and feelings of the reader the beliefs and views by centuries rooted in him about everything existing in the world. So this is a huge task when you think about it. We could reformulate what he means by saying the idea is to undermine and actually transform the formatory apparatus in man. We presume that only holy books are ever likely to have such a dramatic effect on a reader, and only when studied in great depth. So Gurdjieff wrote his book in a way that no other book had previously been written, and we presume that that was because he was aiming to do precisely what he says here. So the question we have to ask is, does the Tales actually solve this first cardinal problem? And that's really a question for you to answer yourself through your activity in reading the Tales. The literary style of the Tales. It's different to the other series of books in All and Everything, and Gurdjieff declares it to be, and in my view it is, a new literary form. It employs many known literary devices, including a multitude of sophisticated dramatic and poetic techniques. A backstory uses a frame story, and it's peppered throughout with observations of Mullah Nasruddin, a kind of Shakespearean fool. So in terms of the dramatic and poetic techniques, this is the whole list. I'll not read them all out, but if you looked up literary devices, you would discover that Gurdjieff used all but about, or maybe Orage, but all but about 5 or 6 of the devices known to man. He also uses an author surrogate, Beelzebub, to interact with a reader audience surrogate, as saying, has the book take on a kind of the feeling of a myth that you're observing, rather than that the author is speaking to you, even though he is. It's a tour de force, and many people believe that, of course. Other aspects of the style: deliberately obscuring meaning, making the reader work to understand what was written. I've often found myself, for example, taking a paragraph apart to try and determine exactly what's being said. You know, that you're not really studying it, you're analysing it to get to the meaning of the words in order then to be able to study the meaning. Deliberately inserted digressions that imitate, he declares this by saying that he's writing according to the grammar of associations, but they imitate the way the associative mind works, and maybe in some way or other it helps him transform the associative mind of the reader. Remarkably frequent use of qualifications, such as, rather than use the money, he says what is called money. And this is used hundreds and hundreds of times, obliging the reader to, in some way or other, try and think out what exactly these words mean. Uses hypnotic repetition and frequent use of lists. So, in terms of hypnotic phrases, there are all of these, but there's 6 and 7, the consequences of the properties of the organ Kunderbuffer, and conditions established by them themselves. And there's a continuous interplay between the consequences of the properties of the organ Kunderbuffer, because they were not our fault, he claims, and activity established by them themselves, which is entirely our fault. And this gets into you. The more you read the book, the more it enters you. And then we have various lists, and this is the lists of human failings, or some examples of them. And this is a technique I've never seen used anywhere before, where he just, in one way or another, repeatedly, touches you with word after word after word in describing the weaknesses and faults of human beings. So, the arcs of the tales. There are many different themes that run through the tales, and it's just worth mentioning this because this isn't the case with the other books. Some you can think of as major themes or arcs. They work together, but it helps if you recognise each of them, so you can consider each of them one by one. As far as I can tell, there are roughly 12, but you may find others. And some of these arcs may continue into the other series, and we will discover that as we study the second and third series. So here are the themes. I'll not read them all out, but there are multiple themes that are running through the tales, and because of that, a great deal of attention is required by the reader, because none of these themes begin on one page and end a few pages later. They interweave throughout the whole of the book. There's also the sound of hearing it being read, even hearing it read to yourself. So this is a quote from Louise March, who was the editor of the German version of the book. Gurdjieff considered a single word or the flow of a sentence so very important. We translators knew Gurdjieff as a teacher of exactness. The second cardinal problem. This, to acquaint the reader with the material required for a new creation and to prove the soundness and good quality of it. So what is the new creation Gurdjieff refers to here? And also, the implication is that we do not have the material we need for a new creation, so he needs to provide it. My view of this is that if you take the first series, then that's an effort to destroy personality, to reorganize personality and to undermine the behavior of the formatory apparatus. And that, if you like, then leaves you with essence able to be reached and able to be itself educated, let's say. And the second series, in my view, is the effort to educate essence, so that we can, in one way or another, change ourselves under his guidance. So whether the remarkable men in this book are accurately described isn't really relevant. It's what they teach us, what reading about them teaches us, that matters. And some of the details in these stories may be autobiographical, certainly bits of the tales are, but I think that should be viewed as incidental. The book is clearly allegorical, and the use of allegory is the defining characteristic of the book. If you do not treat this as allegorical literature, then it merely turns into a mystical adventure story with very little meaning. We need to talk about Gurdjieff's symbolism. Throughout the tales, we observed at various points that Gurdjieff employs Christian symbolism. And we expect to observe the same, in fact we do, in the second and third series. But we shouldn't be simplistic about it. A symbol is like a mathematical variable. It's not a direct equivalent. You don't say, when, for instance, in the tales he mentions money, you don't say money means energy. You think about the way that money pervades the activity of human beings, and you think about energy in that context, for example. So the context matters, and the use of symbols is to use their wider meaning in a kind of analogical way to open up the meaning of something that you're trying to understand. And Gurdjieff uses many symbols you won't find in the New Testament, and there you could say that he had his own language of symbols that included Christian symbolism. So we'll examine that in these study groups. The interweaving of cosmoses that is characteristic in the tales with its 12 themes is less evident in the second and third series. But what is evident in a great way is the use of allegory. So allegory. We encounter allegory as a child, in essence, in the form of fairy stories. So we hear about Sleeping Beauty, without realising she symbolises essence, but something in us recognises it. The heroic prince must fight his way through the forest of thorns to awaken the Sleeping Beauty. And that you could think of as magnetic centre trying to find essence and wake it up. We sometimes know that Pinocchio, with his lying and his conscience, is a kind of prodigal son who, starts out wooden and eventually becomes a real boy. We may retain a taste of these stories when in later life we see allegorical movies, Matrix, Groundhog Day, Man of La Mancha. There's not many, but there's some. Stories like this touch everyone, but they have a deeper impact on some than others. It depends really on magnetic centre, I believe. So when we talk about bee influence, in terms of writing and storytelling, allegory is the primary vehicle for bee influence and is influential in its own right, often without the recipient realising its influence. We need to distinguish between allegory and satire. Gulliver's Travels, for example, is mainly a satire, part allegory, but mainly a satire. Swift was the only English author after the Shakespearean era who experimented with allegory. The 1001 Nights is deeply allegorical. It had a profound effect on European literature when it was first translated from the Arabic in the 17th century into French. And its influence on Voltaire, for example, is just obvious if you read any of Voltaire's, I guess you call them novels. However, it prompted an imitation of style rather than a desire to compose allegories. The great allegorical writer in Europe was William Shakespeare, although few people see the nature of his allegories at all. They were in his plays, of course. So we can talk about the idea of a solar play. Some of Shakespeare's plays are solar plays in the sense that the characters in the play do not represent people at all, they represent parts of the psyche. And this is clearly true, you're going to have to investigate yourself, but it's clearly true of King Lear, Macbeth, Hamlet, The Tempest, Othello, several others. Even the comedy A Midsummer Night's Dream is not as simple as it is depicted, with its dispute between Oberon and Titania. The intellectual versus the emotional, and the curiously named mechanicals. That's what the villagers who are putting on a play for the entertainment of the court are called. Many of the characters in Meeting's Remarkable Men can be thought of as aspects of the psyche. That's the beginning, if you like, the beginning position of studying the book. So, in terms of solar themes, it's worth mentioning that the solar themes occur in sacred literature. The New Testament provides a far more profound set of solar themes than any of Shakespeare's plays. It is, in a sense, a complete solar story. The birth of Christ represents a very specific process, the crystallization of the virgin birth of the body Christian. The crucifixion of Christ depicts the birth of the soul in profound detail. You don't necessarily recognise that, but the more that you study that, the more you realise it is so. A question that's open is whether the stories of the Gospels are actually true to the detail, and thus whether Christ perfectly enacted the great solar play on earth, or whether something similar to that happened, and when the Gospels were written, they added stuff to make it complete, rounded it off, let's say. Hard to know. Third cardinal problem. to assist the arising in the mentation and in the feelings of the reader of a veritable, non-fantastic representation, not of that illusory world which he now conceives, but of the world existing in reality. So, the title, Life is Real Only Then When I Am, has the nature of an aphorism. Or you could say it was just a simple statement of truth. The statement of the third cardinal problem clearly implies that we do not see the world as it really is, but as an illusory world. And that if we follow this in steps, then we begin with the tales in an attempt to destroy the formatory apparatus in man or transform it, and in Meetings of Remarkable Men to educate essence. And the third act would be that we have gradually created an I, and that it would be possible for us to, in one way or another, have acquired a unity. If we take Gurdjieff's assertion here seriously, you can't help but conclude that we live in, well, Plato's cave. So in summary, the purpose of the tale is to eliminate many aspects of personality in the formatory apparatus. Employs a multitude of literary techniques. It is objective. Purpose of the Meetings of Remarkable Men to provide material to assist in the growth of essence. It builds on the first series. Uses symbols, metaphors and allegory. It is not, in my view, objective, but it is a myth. And it can have the desired effect because we've been prepared for it by the tales. The purpose of Life is Real Only Then When I Am to show us reality as it is. It uses symbols, metaphors and allegory. And it's also not, in my view, objective, but it has a unique style. And when you actually consider it in respect of its title, it does have it does have an impact. So, there's a study group which is going to study Meetings of Remarkable Men and Life is Real Only Then When I Am. It commences on May the 2nd with meetings every Tuesday. You can join at any time. You don't have to have been there from the beginning. We will be recording meetings for attendees, so if you miss meetings, then you'll be able to listen to the recording. There is in fact two groups. There'll be a European group which meets at 12 o'clock Texas time, 1 o'clock East Coast time, 6 o'clock UK time, and the US times 4 o'clock Texas time, 5 East Coast, 10 PM UK time. Anyone can attend either, or both if you really want to. You'll find all the details about this on the Tavadan the Gist website, and you'll also find that there's a link in the description of this video that you can just click on if you want to go there. So, thank you for your attention.